point, very soon after this next presentation, will have to retire to chambers for some evidentiary matters. At this point, Joan Gibbs is going to present the aid disbursement.
Thank you and good afternoon. We've come now finally to the last section. I have 4 exhibits I want to introduce pertaining to the question of AIDS dispersal. Before I do, on behalf of the survivors of Hurricane Katrina, and on behalf of the prosecution team, and on behalf of African people in the United States generally, I want to thank you for your time and attention. I want to begin by noting that throughout these proceedings, you've heard evidence concerning federal, state, and local officials' failure to protect and provide aid for the survivors of Hurricane Katrina, including in the first instance, aid to evacuating from the city, then food, water, and medical care. It's not that this failure was because of the lack of capacity or inability on behalf of the United States or the government of any of these states and local government, because we all know that the United States is reportedly the wealthiest and surely the most militarily powerful nation in the world. So it wasn't that they couldn't do it, but they didn't do it. And that's, I guess, the question that lays at the heart of these proceedings. But this failure to provide for the survivors of Katrina, particularly the African American survivors, was compounded by an even greater failure, and that is the failure to help, to receive offers, accept offers of help from other countries. Earlier, there have been allusions to the fact that the United States was offered aid, and it was, and some of that aid it refused. And what I'm going to talk about, the first witness is going to talk about, is the United States' refusal to accept aid from a country that's 90 miles from the United States, a country that has great experience and expertise in dealing with hurricanes, and a country that has generally been a great friend of African people here and abroad, and that's the nation of Cuba. So I want to begin by introducing this evidence, and then I'm going to go to my witness. We have 4 exhibits. The first is exhibit from Kirby Summers, who is the founder of an organization called Katrina Home Drive. And the remainder of the exhibits concern Cuba's offers of aid to the United States, and there are 4 of those exhibits. I think I made enough of the exhibits with respect to Cuba, but the affidavit on behalf of Kirby Summers, there's only 2 because we had problems. To give testimony, we're going to start with Cuba. We're going to call Sabuke Sakura.
Counsel, before you start with this witness, could you just give us a little bit more clarification on the exhibits? Okay. I understand we have a statement from Mr. Summers.
We have a statement from Kirby Summers. She's a woman.
All right, that's
an affidavit.
All right, well that will be exhibit 1.
What, 1? All right. And then there's 2 to 4.
2 through 4?
Yes. 2 is actually 2 statements by His Excellency Fidel Castro concerning the chronology of Cuba's offers of aid to the United States.
And you said that's exhibit 2 and 3?
Yes, that's 2. Okay. 3 concerns Cuba's offers of doctors to the United States. And 4 concerns the Bush exhibit snub of Cuba's offers of medical assistance.
I'm sorry, what was 4 again?
4 is an article concerning the Bush administration snub of Cuba's hurricane relief offer. And I want to note before we begin I said previously that Cuba is 90 miles from the United States, from Florida. But in fact, it's actually closer. If you have to think about it, contextualize it a bit, that Cuba is actually closer to the Gulf regions than California or New York. So in fact, the aid that the United States was looking and people they were trying to get from New York and California and all those places could have come from Cuba in record time, much faster time. So, would you state do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, or would you rather to affirm?
Affirm, swear, whichever one is necessary to tell the truth.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about your background, the work that you do?
Okay. All right. My name is Sobukwe Shakura, and I am
spell it?
Okay, S-O-B-U-K-W-E, like Mangalisa Sobukwe.
Can you say it again?
Sobukwe, S-O-B-U-K-W-E. And Shakura, S-H-U-K-U-R-A. Yeah, I can continue.
Yes.
If I can continue, I'm a co-chair of the National Network on Cuba, and the National Network on Cuba is basically a lobbying organization that comprises a network of many organizations that oppose the U.S. policy and relationship that's currently held by the government of the United States towards Cuba, which includes everything from an embargo to travel restrictions for people who in the United States want to travel with Cuba. So we house, or we can have organizations from the far left to, I guess, more moderate organizations. We have organizations that, like Vince Ramos Brigade and Pastors for Peace, who have basically have demanded the right to travel, have led travel resistance by going and challenging that right to travel. We have organizations that have lobbied inside of the government to try to overturn the laws that are against Cuba. So my work brings me into a variety of intersections with organizations to do that work on Cuba. And part of our work is, of course, to spread information that puts Cuba in a better light, that gives the truth about Cuba's relationship, which goes back a very long way, as the attorney has started out, and has continued even though the adverse positioning of the government among the people of the United States. There has been ongoing relationships, and we continue to send out material all the time on our website, which is how we were able to know about all the articles and all of the that were issued in Grandma and in other places that reaffirmed that in August that the Cuban government had actually made offers to the United States for aid.
Could you describe for the court and also for the audience what these offers entail?
Yeah, I can, but I just want to, I guess, put that in the context, because it may be hard for some people to believe that Cuba should make an offer to the United States government in as much as the United States government is allowing two known terrorists, two known members of organizations that have said that their goal is to overthrow the government of Cuba, and have been involved, admittedly, and at least self-admittedly, that they were involved in the bombing of a jet over Cuban airspace. And in fact, these two men are in Florida now. One is Orlando Bosch, and the other one Louis Carrillis. And not to mention that right now there are 5 members of Cubans who came down here to monitor these men and the organizations that they are associated with, who are now in jail, and were in jail at the time of the offer that were made, and they've been in jail in the United States since the late 90s. So it's probably easy for some people to dismiss or think that Cuba would not make this offer. But Cuba, because of its experience and its in the world and responding to human disasters, regardless of the government's philosophy, if we look at that history, we'll understand that Cuba was ready to respond immediately to this disaster. In fact, the Cubans were ready to send as 1,100 doctors within the first 36 hours. They had already assembled and gotten ready and started moving those doctors to the capital. And they were ready to make that offer and started making that offer as early as August 30th, one day after the Katrina hit here in New Orleans. And I think that is documented in the article from Grandma that I think our judges have.
Yes, it's in Exhibit 2.
Okay.
And it's actually in Exhibit 3, too.
And it wasn't just a few, as the tragedy continued, or as they understood the severity of the tragedy, they increased that number of doctors to a figure of over 1,600. And many of the doctors were specialists, some of them psychiatrists, urologists, all kinds of doctors who they felt it would be useful in this situation. They I think the number of, there were 699 doctors who had served in international missions in over 43 countries. And there were at least 800 women and about more than 800 women and more than 700 men who were ready to go on this mission. And in a subsequent article, that's again in Grandma, it also not only shows that these doctors were in Havana, called to Havana, and Castro was telling them basically what their mission would be, and informing them about and thanking them for being willing to go. And many of these doctors had also been pulled back from other missions that they were supposed to be going to in Africa and in Latin America and Asia.
Okay, let me ask you something further. How would you characterize Cuba's expertise in the area of hurricanes?
Oh, I mean, it's easy that, in fact, it's known throughout the world that Cuba has evacuated as many as 1.5 million of its population in the area when hurricanes have hit. During the year previous to the Katrina and Rita hurricanes, they evacuated 1.5 million people off of the coast. And visiting Cuba, I was also told that not only did they evacuate the people during Dennis and then I think it was Ivan too, they also evacuated the marine animals from the aquarium that is in Havana. So they were able to move 1.5 million people. And during both of those hurricanes, during Ivan, I don't believe they lost one person, and I believe they may have lost about 15 to 16 people, and out of that 1.5 million, and the hurricane Dennis, I believe.
Are you familiar with any of Cuba's aid to other countries in the world during times of natural disasters or wars, and what that aid has been?
Well, one, Cuba has a core of some 25,000 doctors that they are serving in missions across the world, in about 66 to 68 countries, depending. I'm not sure what the level is this year, but it has been up to 68. And I believe it's somewhere around 66 now. They've responded to devastations in Haiti. They've responded to devastations in Pakistan. They've responded to devastations all around the world. Their doctors the United States one of the organizations, MEDIC, which is also mentioned in these documents, has constantly talked about the role of Cuba in world health in general, and how it can and is one of the best prepared organizations to respond to disasters.
Thank you. I have two more questions, but before, I actually have two, but I want to ask you one question and then go to my final question.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Cuba's medical programs, particularly one that offers medical training to doctors or people seeking to become doctors in the United States? Could you describe that program briefly?
Yeah, I want to make it known that it's not really just an offer to the United States, but in fact, it's again, it's a ongoing training program where they're providing services of doctors, and I should say the training of doctors to a tune of over 10,000 doctors that are in their medical program from around the world. I think it represents about 25 countries around the world, and the program that now is offered to Latino and African people of Latino and African descent in the United States was a program that grew out of a mission or a visit of some of the Congressional Black Caucus, who witnessed and as they were taking a tour and looking at the medical school and hearing that Cuba was providing this service to train doctors for underserved communities around the world. They said that there are underserved communities right in the United States. If we looked in the South, in Mississippi and New Orleans and places in the South and other rural areas of the country, that there were plenty of underserved communities. And it's then that the Cuban government decided that they would offer at least 500 scholarships to members of the of underserved communities here in the United States. That in fact they would train. The only commitment that the students would have is to come back and to serve within again underserved communities inside the United States. In fact, the first graduate of the school was a young man by the name of Cedric Edwards, right here from New Orleans. And his family had to evacuate, I believe, somewhere in California after the flood. But he did graduate, he did come back, and he did pass his test to become a doctor.
Okay. I have one final question. I know you weren't offered, your testimony, you're not being offered as an expert. But in your opinion, and I only ask you your opinion, that's all you can offer really in the final analysis. But in your opinion, do you think that Cuba's offers of aid would have been beneficial to the people of New Orleans?
Well, obviously I'm not an expert, but I think that if we look at all of the gathered testimony of what I've been hearing today, we see that there was a need for medical assistance to the people who were left stranded here in New Orleans during the hurricanes. But I think that not only that, if we look at some of the evidence, if we look at the radio interview that was conducted by Bernie Dreyer, who works for Radio Havana, who was an Irish national, interviewed people in Texas. I think the lady's name was Miss Poindexter, who said she had a satellite and was listening to people's calls for doctors and the need for doctors, and that's documented in the package that was given to the judges. And it's also, and it's well known that this radio interview took place, and not only is it important that we note that this offer was made and these doctors were needed, but to give some example that it wasn't just Cuba, but the United States also refused aid from Venezuela, and that's documented in one of the articles that would appear in the Guardian newspaper in Britain. So I think we can see that these offers are, the United States cannot deny that these offers were made, and I think that the testimony of the medical doctors that's provided in this information, from Medic, who also made an assessment that the doctors were needed, the testimony of actual citizens that I mentioned that was recorded in Radio Havana and other publications, shows that it's not just me, as not trying to be an expert anyway, but not just my opinion, but obviously it's the opinion of medical doctors who work in this field every day, and who are experts, and the actual testimony of citizens who were here who were victims of the flood. So that would be my.
Let me just ask you one last question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Why didn't you think the United States refused such an offer? If it was clearly circumstances suggest it was necessary, why do you think they refused it?
I mean, of course, I think that some of the testimony that I've heard so far, and some of my own ideas about it are, it seems as though rather than have those people be helped, that was more important for them, one, to never allow for any positive image of Cuba to emerge. Secondly, I think that there must, if the United States, again, is one of the richest countries in the world, can't do for its citizens what Cuba, a small, poor country, can do not only for its citizens, but many people in the world, it means that this country lacks the political will if they have the resources, if they have the money, and they don't do it, and they refuse to let other people do it, they lack the political will for it to happen.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Does judges have any questions?
I have a question. Could I?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, thank you. I'm not smiling when I'm asking this question.
Okay.
This is serious. Do you think their refusal to have Cuban doctors on American soil is linked to fear of terrorism?
Well, I really don't think it's a fear of terrorism. If the U.S. there has never been a recorded act of terrorism from the country of Cuba on the soil of the United States. It only the other way around.
In their minds.
Well, I think that since the United States government has actually met at different points in time, the FBI has actually met with Cuban officials and exchanged and attempts for the Cubans to stop and to ask the United States to help end terrorist acts that have been conducted from Florida and other places in the United States. I think that it's clear that the terrorism is going from the United States to Cuba and not from Cuba to the United States. There's never, in any record, has the United States ever stated even that there has been an act of terrorism from the country of Cuba.
Any further questions, Mr.
Yes. Mr. Shakur, if you know, what countries did the United States accept aid and assistance from to give aid to the Katrina survivors?
I don't know which countries they actually accepted it from, but I do know that they listed and actually reported publicly several countries that and it's listed in these documents, and I can't say that I remember them verbatim.
As I've gone through the documents, I've only been able to see, and maybe I just need to read further, a list of countries that offered, but I was just wondering if you knew which countries the United States accepted.
I don't know if they accepted the offers from any, but they acknowledged certain countries, as you said in the document. It doesn't really say if they accepted that material, and I don't know which ones that if any, that they actually accepted it from. But from some of the countries, they never even acknowledged that the offers were made. I think in the document it talks about the fact that the Cubans have in the first article that was a interview on Roundtable of Fidel Castro, that he talks about the litany of opportunities that they had to try to retail and through the interest section to try to allow the United States to know that they were offering these doctors over and over again. In fact, one of the Cuban ambassadors was actually asked to come to a session where they were discussing again in the White House the offers that they were receiving, and still Cuba was never acknowledged that they had made that offer. And I guess, but in answer to your immediate question, I can't say that I know if they accepted any assistance.
Okay. Any other questions? You have a question?
Quelle a été la réaction du maire de la Nouvelle-Orléans
What was the reaction
lorsque
of the mayor of New
le
Orleans
gouvernement d'État américain a refusé l'aide de Cuba et de Venezuela?
when the federal government in Washington refused the aid proposed by Cuba?
I can't answer that question. Actually, I don't know what his position was on it. I don't have any recorded information on what the mayor's reaction was to that, and so I can't testify to that.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
With one final witness with respect to age dispersal, and then we're going to have a statement. Wilmer Taylor.
Okay. Thank you.
No, I have to swear you in first. Do you swear to tell the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Could you state your name for the record? Spell it for them.
My name is Wilma Taylor, WILMA TAYLOR. I'm a Katrina survivor, and I now reside in Vicksburg, Mississippi.
Let me ask the questions, okay? Where were you living on August 29, 2005?
I was in Baton Rouge.
Okay. Were you living in Baton Rouge?
No.
We're not having any mic. You're not being amplified. Go ahead.
August 29th, no, I had took refuge in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
So you left before,
Yes, I left 2 days before the hurricane.
but what was your official residence? And
7501 Scottwood in the Briarwood subdivision in New Orleans East.
was this a private house or public house?
It's a private house.
Okay. Do you have insurance on that house?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Are you living there now?
No, I sold it.
Why did,
Well, my background, I have associate in accounting and a bachelor's in psychology, and I did a lot of work with behaviors. So I kind of knew once they didn't do anything about the Caucasian people that stood at the hospitals and whatever. I knew that it was best for me to stay out of Dodge because I knew it was going to be rough. And so I decided to stay in Vicksburg and kind of drive backwards and forwards because I'm a single parent, to take care of business and not be too far away. But once I had gotten my house gutted and
someone took most of the money. I paid $5,000, and they actually ripped and stole my copper. And when the city turned back on the water, my house got flooded again. So I decided to take my loss and run.
Okay. Did you try to seek any assistance in any form from federal, state, or local governments?
Yes. FEMA was the first organization that everybody was told to apply. And according to FEMA, they were going to sustain us up into 18 months. Well, after 7 months of, how I got to Vicksburg was that I got a call from a friend girl of mine's who told me that an apartment complex was just giving apartments for 3 months to homeowners, and you had to show that you owned a home. And if you referred people to the apartment complex, they would give you $300. So I was a part of somebody getting $300. But anyway, we found out that the manager of this apartment complex really embezzled a lot of funds from the survivor from FEMA and actually got hauled off to jail this January. After 7 months, by me working, because my field of work before Katrina, I was a director of a support service at a private retirement facility, and I also part-time work with prevention with parents and children that experience violence and have dealt with drugs. I actually contract my service out, and as of January 2005, I went full-time into that because I was kind of well known in the school system and in the juvenile system. So I was able to go into my own business then. After about 7 months with FEMA, they started getting harder about, in order to get more aids from them, you had to have a plan. And at the time, we didn't even know if they were going to allow us to build back in New Orleans. So I started seeing how, instead of it being 18 months, they were really trying to get us off of it sooner. So I immediately took my resources, paid off most of my bills, and bought me a house and just started all over, because it was almost beginning to be where you live by the telephone. This one have a little bit, you ran over there. That one have a little bit, you ran over there. So I just got out of that arena and just did the best I could. I thought by having at least 20 years of experience, it would be very easy for me to get a job. And I put some money down on a house before it was built. But I found out that certain towns have certain cultures and certain requirements, and it's nothing about what you know.
What
So-
do you mean by that? If I may interrupt just for a second. What do you mean by that certain requirements?
Well, the Vicksburg area that I live in, everything is controlled by the mental health service. Like I did prevention, and I work with a lot of government program. The mental health in Vicksburg handled all that. So even though I worked with at-risk kids and I have worked at schools, all that was secured. And they weren't letting you in there because they had their own agenda. So I decided to take a job in Jackson and was commuting every day. And by me going from one place to another, and when they came out with Project Alert, which was supposed to be people to go out and handle crisis for survivors, and I thought that would be a good job for me because I am from New Orleans and I had a lot of clients. But the guy at the mental health in Vicksburg gave it to some of his friends, and he told me that I was like a cat. If you throw me up in the air, I would land on all fours. And so I took that and said, you know, I can do that. I can find a way to survive here. So that's when I started looking, and they finally seen that I had so much experience. They hired me in their substance abuse department, and I stood there until January of 23rd, 2006.
How far is Vicksburg from Jackson?
About an hour. If you go a little bit faster than the speed limit, it could be 45 minutes.
So where are you working at the moment? If you
Right
are
now-
working.
Yes, right now I'm working for People Hurricane Relief Fund, for the Mississippi Disaster Relief Coalition, and I also work part-time for Parent Training and Information Center as a parent educator.
And what is it exactly that you do for the People's Hurricane Relief Fund and the Disaster Relief?
Well,
Coalition?
I really thought I was out of the battle because my son has ADHD, and even though he is
You should explain what that is, pardon me. You should explain.
hypotension deficit disorder, he has a very high IQ, and he's just hyper. You know, he's always thinking, and I think I have a little bit of that too. But we didn't know what you call it back then. But all throughout school, I had to advocate for him. And once I got him out of high school, I felt like a triumphant. So I was through fighting. But it wasn't until when I moved to Vicksburg, a lot of survivors' children who had 504, which is a program for children that is not eligible for an IEP, which is an individual educational plan, but needed some form of accommodation. They weren't honoring in Mississippi, and you're supposed to honor a child diagnosis or his individual plan anywhere in the United States, and Mississippi wasn't having it. And at first I felt a little bit resentful towards God, because I felt I paid my dues, and either I was going to watch these people fall by the wayside or I had to do something to get involved. It was the Mississippi Disaster Relief Fund that tried to gather up all the survivors all over and was actually trying to organize them to see what they need and whatever. So from there, we were introduced, we were able to discuss some of the problems we were having. By me being a homeowner, one of the problems that I had was once my flood insurance paid me the money, me and my mortgage company, and when you take your mortgage check to them, they gave you two alternatives. Number one, give them the money, and when and if your mayor or governor decide to allow you to bill, we will give you each bid at a time that you get a licensed person. They show the price, you get certain bids, and then they'll delinquish that money. Or you buy off your house and we'll give you this $6,000 or $5,000, whichever left over. Of course, if you don't know where the next dollar's coming from, you're going to want to buy off your house, and that's what I did. Unbeknowing that if you do that, SBA will not loan you any money. So I didn't know that, and when I was working for FEMA and found out that SBA is not going to loan me any money, you know, I was pretty upset because I didn't know how the system went, and most, I would guarantee you, 99.999% of the people in New Orleans didn't know either.
I have just one last question, and that is, are you familiar with other agencies, private agencies, distribution of aid?
Sure. I was getting to that.
Okay. I want to just warn you that,
Okay.
to be brief, because people, if you see people keep coming up beside me.
Okay, they have, Red Cross was one of the organizations. First, I want to tell you HUD offered survivors housing, And if you lived there for a year, after a year, you could buy them. Well, I actually went to every house listed in the area of Vicksburg. Most of the houses was houses that you would tear down. So they weren't even livable. I was trying to make something work and bought a builder, and he told me most of them had foundation problem, don't even touch it. So that was kind of like a joke too. Then after that, we heard about the Means to Recovery by Red Cross. We found out that Red Cross would help us with getting transportation, and that we could apply if we had any case managers. And of course, people had signed up with Salvation Army, United Way, Catholic Charities, Lutheran. And when we met with the people from Washington to try to explain the program to us, they couldn't. We couldn't find out how do we qualify about getting this Means to Recovery. The case managers were asking more questions than the clients, and we really seen that they were confused. The people that had the money was confused. So finally we found out that the application, and this is the application here.
You want to leave this for the judges to review?
Might as well. I'm not going to be able to do anything with it. It's actually 30 pages long. Now, granted, if you're a case manager, and if you ever did case management, you always are exhausted. You're always overloaded, overburdened. So therefore, they had their own caseload plus this 30-page per survivor. So the system was set up to fail because none of the case managers wanted to tell us about this program because they would have had to fill out 30 pages. So it was a well-kept secret. Me working in a social field, I started spreading it around by calling different people that I knew, and the man from Washington told my case manager, put a muzzle on my mouth, and if he didn't, he would get fired. Well, come to find out, he did get fired, and they weren't going to give me any money, and I kind of wrote the man in Washington, and eventually, to shut me up, they finally gave me $5,000, which it should have been 10 on a car, but I still wouldn't shut up. People, Hurricane and the Mississippi Disaster Relief Fund, we began to work on it, and finally we met with the man from Red Cross, and we actually asked him for some demands, and one was to cut down on the paperwork. Another was to provide us case managers that they would pay for so that they could actually service us. And we asked them a number of things, and a lot of things were denied. We even did a protest to try to get their attention, and they actually put on some of their recordings that the Means to Recovery that these people are talking about is a hoax. So when we met with them again, we told them that we wanted them to apologize about that because technically Red Cross received $175 million. They stated that they only spend $10 million on recovery and $10 million to access to care, but they couldn't account for the rest of the millions. Access to Care was another failed program because a lot of us in that area, some of them tried to go to the mental health facility, and I worked at one, and they had a lot of problems because the medication that they were on, that mental health service decided to strip them of all their meds and give them what they wanted. And so a lot of them didn't go and receive their meds, didn't want to have anything to do with them, but yet they had bipolar and other mental illness. Access to Care was supposed to be where I could go and choose my provider, and Access to Care, Red Cross, would pay for it. Well, nobody wanted to deal with Red Cross because it would be 3 to 4 months for them to get for one case. So what's the point in having a system and nobody would receive it. So we confronted them with the turnarounds and how many providers wouldn't serve it. We began to see that a lot of their programs were set up to fail. And so it was like the dog chasing its tail. We're still trying to find out about their service. We even have...
Would you like to, if you'd like to give me those documents?
I would
and then
like
I'm
to
gonna
give
have
you the
to,
document that we...
And then I'm going to have to, with all due respect, I'm going to have to stop.
Okay. This is Mr. Mark. Also, I just want to say for the WINS program, the job training, I found out just casually reading that Mississippi, the governor there, had applied and he received exactly $31.5 million in employment educating survivors. When I searched, here, you could put that into,
Okay.
that's from USA Today. When we tried to find out about it, come to find out it was just reserved for the people around the Gulf Coast area, and they told us if we want any training monies, we should go back to New Orleans. And so that was a slap in the face. So we also, from picketing, I'll make you copies of these. They harassed us with the police, and we had to register. It's been an uphill battle just trying to get AIDS.
Thank you. And for the panel, thank you. And, because of scheduling of the tour, we're going to just witness you could have for questioning after the tour is over, as well as an additional statement. Is that correct? Okay.
Your Honors, with all due respect, we need to adjourn until 5:15. We have some matters to attend in evidentiary chambers. So for the listening public, we should be returning to this chamber to do any questioning of this witness and the remaining issues that we have to attend. So we need to adjourn now. Yeah. What? No, because we didn't want other people to think they're going to...
You got our statement written?
Hmm?
You got our statement written?
Because it's just for the judges and the conveners.